Want to open the June 7th, 2022 meeting of the Chino Valley General Work Session for the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for everyone's information, we have 2 microphones on this table. They will pick up those of you sitting in your chairs talking. And we are posting this on our website as we do our videos as well. So if you don't want whatever it is you're saying to your partner to go public, be careful what you say. So before Frank gets started, what I wanted to share with you is that a friend and one of my girlfriends and I went to Antelope Slot Canyon, and while we were there, we went to Glen Canyon Dam, and when we were there, I took a picture of what the water experts at the Glen Canyon Dam believe how water is distributed in the United States, and I thought that this was interesting. So I know that there's confusion about which land uses use how much water and how much does it take to, for an example, how many gallons of water does it take to produce an egg? They actually have that here. I wasn't really in my area of questions, but I thought it was interesting that they split how they've got the percentage of freshwater use as 70% ag, 22% industrial, 8 domestic and municipal. And for those of us in municipal areas, we think everything is because of residential, and that is not really the case. So I just wanted to share this because I thought these are the water experts. I'm just taking a picture of the information that they're sharing with the public. So with that, I'll turn it over to Frank, who has a presentation on a couple of sections of code that he's responsible for, and not that you need to know that stuff, but what he's done with his code impacts some of the things that we have to do in the subdivision code. And so we're going to be talking about that. You want to be at the microphone?
Sure. You can do it from here.
Or you can sit up there,
Yeah.
Whatever makes you comfortable.
Does the microphone work with cheese?
Yeah.
Would
Are
you like
are
me
you
to?
doing the slide show?
Yeah,
So-
I can do it with just grab the mouse and
And then there,
keyboard
yeah.
if you're comfortable with
That
that.
works.
That'll work.
I'm more comfortable with that.
Okay.
Make sure it's on. Oh, now you're gonna make me read this small.
The very bottom one there.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
And even though, Frank, the microphone will pick you up clearly, you need to speak loud enough so everyone in the room can hear you, because we don't really have a magnification.
Okay.
Thanks.
Pretend my stepfather is here, so. Retired Air Force, too much time around jets.
There you go.
All right, so what we've got is, this is the presentation I gave the council before they adopted the code amendment changes. The water and sewer codes in the town code are primarily in chapters 50 and 51. So when you see that, the cheat sheet I kind of handed out goes over some of the main changes. So the reason we did this is primarily we were working with the Water and Utility Subcommittee, which is composed of 3 council members, to work on this. We worked on them with the town manager's office, finance, public works, development services, and town attorney. So it's been a long process. Some of these changes go back well before I was here, time-wise. So I've been here since 2017. But it's to align the town codes with the council philosophy and manage development activities. And it's also a little bit of a bridge to get us through until the general plan and accompanying master plans for utilities and others get updated. So chapter 50 is general provisions, that's administrative details, and then 50 and 51 gets into more the nuts and bolts of what Public Works does. So, the big change was cleaning up language and removing unused language, updating words, like we had sewer system in one section, collection system in another, things like that. We tidied all that up. And then managing development, and a big emphasis was also for water and sewer connections, which I'm sure this committee's dealt with too. So this is where we start getting into that cheat sheet. So these slides are basically a representation of what is on that one-page summary sheet. So the authority of the director, the original code had the authority under just Public Works Director. So as Public Works Director, I had the authority to waive bills, allow payment schedules for bills, determine connection fees and whether or not to waive those, that sort of thing. So a lot of that was changed from Public Works Director to Finance Director, because now how the government works here in town is the utility billing operations are under finance now. So we cleaned up that language so that anything to do with the billing and the payments and things like that, handling money, is under the finance director rather than the Public Works Director. Kind of cleaned up to how the administration has shifted over the years. So then we move on, again, billing practices. We cleaned it up a little bit. Instead of changed to is set by the finance director instead of approved by the town manager. That just lets it streamline a little bit more. And the town manager hires a finance director, so if they don't like it, they should fire the finance director. So, which Joe does a great job. I'm not saying fire Joe. And so then applications for service, that was removed from statute and left up to the finance director so that we could more readily adapt to changes in policies. And water quality standards, the old language had each standard spelled out with the scientific jargons and the parts per million and all that. So we basically tried to clean that up and reference the EPA, ADQ, and DWR references so that when they change their rules, we don't have to change ours. It just follows what the state and federal government changes make. And then the technical standards was removed and updated some of the older standards. So as we got through the pre-treatment, let me catch up on my notes. There we go. Those are just updated a little bit for all sewage that exceeds local limits instead of, again, the individual standards. The appeals process were removed and brought in line with the general reference to the general code, so that we didn't have to update those individually when we update the general code. Connection fees, the actual fees themselves are removed, so we don't have to change the code every time fees are changed. It just refers to council resolution on the fees. So when council adopts any fee schedule changes, we don't have to amend the code to make those changes. The council still approves all of the fee schedules. And then we removed low income rate. That was a section that was in there that had never been used since the original section was adopted. So what we did there is removed it and deferred it to council resolution. So council still has the authority and right to put that in place, but it hadn't been used for years, so or ever. So it was taken out to try and clean up the code a little bit. So as we move down to sewer disconnection, we had a little gap in our code, so this was put in so that when a sewer customer moves and a new tenant comes in, the account is based on the tenant. So say a renter moves out and another one moves in. If they don't set up an account and they're on another, there's 5 water companies in town. So say they get their water from another water company, but they don't come in and set up a sewer service. This section of code gives the town the ability to plug that service until they get hooked up with the town. Because we don't have the ability to shut off water sometimes, so we need the ability to plug in sewer and not give away free sewer service. We added some definitions such as line charge and those good things. Those are mainly revolved around repayment agreements when a developer comes in, makes in a water or sewer line extension across somebody else's property. It was allowing them to recoup some of those costs and basically put an assessment on that. We updated that code and changed some definitions to make that a little more clear. It was in the code before. And then, again, some of the terms, that's where we had sewage works and CT collection treatment, recharge system, and it all means sanitary sewer system. So trying to make things more understandable. Connection tap installation process, we found 2 different sections of the code. One called for the homeowner to install the tap. These are on the individual lots, what I call the onesie-twosies that are just out there. Not subdivisions, but individual existing lots. One section of the code had the homeowner installing all the way to the main. The other section of the code had the town installing the individual taps. So we clarified that and went with, for an individual lot that is out there, not part of a subdivision, up to a 2-inch water or a 6-inch sewer, the town will install the taps and the lines to get to the edge of the right of way. And then the homeowner with their building permit takes care of it after that.
That's who remains responsible for it?
Hmm?
They remain, that's where the town cuts off responsibility in
Yeah.
the future too?
Yeah, we've always had the policy that if they can, if say there's a sewer clog up and they can
Or a
prove that
leak
it's
or whatever.
inside the right of way, usually by a TV camera, the town picks up the bill for that repair for the portion that's in the right of way. So there's a little bit of give and take with the property owners, is how we word that. And then the water meter's pretty easy. The water's pretty easy because the meter's usually set on the property line.
That's where you cut off.
So anything up to the meter is ours, anything past the meter is the homeowner's. And it just kind of makes sense that if it's ours, we should install it. So when it gets over 2-inch taps, that you're in a commercial situation anyway, and commercial properties have to hire a licensed plumber to install it anyway. So here we've got the more impactful changes that aren't just cleanups and things like that. So we wanted to have thoughtful growth. We wanted to discourage small lot subdivisions less than an acre that are remote and off-town utilities. You may have seen some of these popping through in the past couple of years, trying to get half-acre lots way out, for example, on the west side of town where we didn't have any utilities. And state law, or state administrative code, doesn't allow both well and septic on a lot less than an acre. You have to have at least an acre to be able to have both of them. You could have one or the other, but you can't have both unless than an acre per Arizona administrative code, things like that. And this is where we're trying to bridge until the general plan update can get in place, and we'll really clarify more where the areas of these developments and the public involvement process and all that comes in. And we'll do a much better job at defining where and when the development goes along with. And I imagine, Lori, that general plan will look at where we have utilities, where we want utilities, and all of that good stuff.
Yes, it
And it's
will.
part of the considerations. kind of a chicken and egg thing. So as we move on, section 51059 reserves the town's right to upsize lines. We're talking mainly here when a developer comes in. And I've got the next slide here, which will help do it a little bit. It preserves council's authority to subsidize large developments if they think it's in the best interest of the town. And it limits the potential town contribution to the cost of materials. And I will go over that a little bit. So for example, a developer needs an 8-inch line to serve a development. The way the code is now written, the town can require that developer to install up to a 12-inch line at no cost to the town. Or for sewer, it can go up to 18-inch. So the example number 2, we said, say the developer needs a 10-inch water line, but the town wants a 24-inch water line. Since that's over 12, the town would need to pay for the material cost of the pipe alone for the difference between 12 and 24-inch pipe. The installation is still on the contractor to install it, since they gotta put pipe in anyway. And then example 3, if a developer needs an 18-inch water line to serve a development, that's over the 12, but since they need over 12 anyway, it's still their cost. So if they need to upsize bigger than 12-inch for their uses, the town doesn't have to pay for it. The old code actually had the town paying for some of that cost, even if it wasn't, say, needed by the town, but needed by the developer. So we tried to clear that up and have it pretty set that anything over 12 the town contributes for unless it's needed for the development, and anything over 18 for sewer the town will contribute some for unless it's needed for the developer. So that unless needed for the developer wasn't in the old code. And that'll help once we get past the general plan and the accompanying master plans. Then we'll have a good layout of, we need a 36-inch pipe here, so it's best for the town to add a little bit and get what we need for full build out. So that's how the master plans will follow that general plan update, and we'll get some good planning going on. This section 51059 talks about repayment agreements, and again, this is where, say, a developer or someone extends a sewer across 2 or 3 properties that aren't theirs. Say, now if they're within 300 feet, we'll go over that in a minute, they have to extend. But say they need to go, like Brook Apartments went 1,800 plus feet to extend. This gives them the ability to get some portion of that back from the properties in between there that will connect in the future. And this was partially in the old code. We clarified some of the agreement procedures. Council still approves each individual agreement, but we extended the term from 10 to 20 years because we found out in the last recession 10 years can go by quick without any development. So we thought 20 years is most fair. Once you get past 20, you start having companies change hands. Maybe owner of the company passes away, leaves it to a bunch of heirs. It's hard to figure out who the repayment will go to, because the town is going to collect these repayments and be the pass-through to the person that puts in the water line.
Have these already been approved by council?
Yes. So one thing that made them feel better is these agreements, we will add notices to those properties. It's repayment notice, is that the term, Lori, that is done with that? And those will be recorded at the county. So when you buy a property and do a title search, it'll come up so that the new property owner is not blindsided when they come in for a building permit. We say, hey, you've got a $5,000 payback you need to pay. It's recorded. And again, council has the approval say for each agreement. I would bring it to them, but council will vote and approve each individual repayment agreement. So we move on.
That's on a project-by-project basis. I mean,
Right.
they could also vote to not approve a repayment,
Right.
make the developer pay for that.
Right.
If
That's,
they want to put this development in, they are subject to pay for the whole.
yep, and in
extension.
theory, they could approve one and deny another one.
Okay.
We did put one through for Brook Apartments, and council approved that. So that goes past several properties, including the potential Hawks Nest development. So there's repayments based off the road frontage of those properties. So as the line goes down to north, the north side of the road pays for half of that line, the south side of the road pays for the other half until it gets to their property. And that payment is collected at the time a building permit or a connection fee is collected with the town. Again, after 20 years, it expires, and the original developer that paid for that extension is just out of luck. So what we did with this is kind of relax some requirements for when the private developers spending their money on that. The town procurement code is a lot tighter than the state Title 34 requirements. So there was a lot more bidding requirements, which just raises prices for everyone. So when this was modified, just follow the state law in Title 34 as far as when town money's contributed, and then relax some of the procurement when it's privately funded. And that was to try and let development proceed faster than, say, I could proceed bidding a project. It probably takes me 3 or 4 months longer just to advertise for the bids and put out bids than a private firm could do it. So 51075 is where we get into the real meat of some of this code. So this is for water. Water and sewer are slightly different, but this gets into connections. So if you're on a single residential lot, not in a subdivision, say it was maybe split a few years ago, and you're just sitting out there on a vacant lot and want to build, if there's water line at the property line, you're going to need to connect to the town water. So
Yeah,
I think in the past we
you won't
had
be
a
allowed to do
200-foot rule or a 400-foot rule. Now it's an individual home builder, could be an owner builder, could be hiring a contractor. If the water is at the nearest property line, they need to connect. If it's 50 feet away, they don't. So for subdivisions that have acre lots or larger, if the water is within 300 feet of the nearest portion of that subdivision boundary, they need to extend that water line and put that 1 acre lot subdivision on water. Even though the state might say you can drill wells, the town's saying, no, you're gonna put in town water. And then for any subdivisions that go through the subdivision process that have less than 1 acre lots, and that's where we're looking at the quarter, half acre zoning type things to bridge us through the general plan. Any subdivision with less than 1 acre lots must connect to a water system.
Applies to sewer also.
We're getting there. So, the answer is yes.
In that case, wouldn't it be advantageous to make an individual lot hook if, say, they were 50 feet or 75 feet or?
It was a cost consideration. You're probably in the $300 a foot range to extend the main these days.
Just a huge advantage for the town and to save water if they're on
Yeah.
town water and sewer.
So,
Getting that reclamation.
yeah. But this is what council decided to go with. So, trying to make those compromises, I think, about economics versus what benefits the town as far as reclamation goes. So when we move on to sewer, for non-residential or multifamily, any commercial type property, if they're within 300 feet, they have to connect. even on individual lots. When you get into single lot residential, again, this is if it's at the property line, they have to connect at 1 acre or larger. For new subdivisions, 1 acre or larger, it's the same if they're within 300 feet. So for new subdivisions less than 1 acre, they have to connect to the sewer or create their own sewer system. And the way I'm recommending it for residential sewer systems, if they want to do what we call a package plan or some sort of individual sewer system, if it's residential, I'm recommending that the town operate that. If it's commercial, say an RV park or something, that's a little different, because if that commercial enterprise closes, I hated saying that, but as an example, if that commercial enterprise closes, the use goes away. But if it's a residential, say
So they'd have to close the whole
an
thing.
HOA fails, the town's gonna have to take it over anyway. So in a residential situation, might as well have the town run it and know it's run right by certified operators anyway. Again, commercial is a little different, and that will in the end be up to council. Perhaps you guys to recommend and council to ultimately make that call when it gets to commercial on an individual basis. So here with sewer, say a lot split creates a lot less than 1 acre, they still have to connect to sewer. Water's a little different, because technically you could haul water. So that's where water's a little different. Sewer's more of a utility, so we're more stringent on the sewer side. That's really the only difference, is when you get to those lot splits less than 1 acre. Failed septic, they may connect, but not required. So if it can't be repaired, they'll have to connect. But if the county says they can repair it, council didn't want to require someone to connect. They wanted to give them the opportunity to repair it, because it could be substantially cheaper than connecting to the town sewer. And again, with package plants, it would be part of a development agreement, and each individual way it's administered and set up and run would be part of that development agreement approved by council on a case-by-case basis. So even my recommendation, council could change, because council's the one that decides it. And this is just kind of a fail-safe that preserves the town's right to force a connection if there's a menace to public health. That's kind of what created our sewer system in the first place. We were getting warnings from ADQ about high nitrates in the soil from the high density of septic systems in the Chino Meadow, primarily in the Chino Meadows development. And that's one reason the sewer system was created, was to pull that from individual septic systems and get it, our sewer plant, which basically is what takes the nitrates out and treats for nitrogen, and clarifies that and then recharges it into the ground. So that's kind of what we've got going. Again, this presentation was a little old. Need some corresponding definitions to minor subdivision and lot splits in the UDO.
This is what we're gonna transition into next.
One changes the other. And then again, the general plan and all these master plans kind of go hand in hand. So that's about it. I know it's a lot, but the big thing is some of the sewer connections, we had a 200-foot rule, a 400-foot rule, a 0-foot rule. I think we had another rule that I can't remember. So we consolidated all those a while ago, and this was trying to bridge us and deal with some of the. Is the quarter and half acre zoning in effect yet, or okay? So it was, made these changes to try and accommodate that quarter and half acre zoning until we can get to the general plan update, was the big push for this. And the other thing was just separating out the finance and utility, because Public Works doesn't do utility billing anymore.
Okay, well,
All right.
Interesting, isn't it?
So to piggyback off of Frank here, he did all the hard work for us, and what I am handing out before you is essentially the outline of the text amendment that will be or that is going to be following this. Hopefully, you'll be seeing it next planning and zoning session. I'm gonna hand one to Frank. You want one?
Sure.
And that's it. Gonna keep on.
you have to give one to the clerk.
There we go. All right.
I'll get to this.
So, several of these are as a result of the text amendment that Frank just talked about, but then some of these others are a lot of housekeeping that we needed to do to our subdivision code. So I'll just go top to bottom here. First one, amend the section of minor subdivision to ensure that minor subdivisions are strictly for lots 1 acre and larger in size. Within the minor subdivision process as it exists today, they have the potential to have lesser requirements if at the determination of the Public Works Director, if they don't need a drainage study, or typically they don't have to pay, traffic analysis. They have some alleviations on roads as far as improvements. Once you get under an acre in size, that changes a lot of things. So we're just gonna cut it off before we even start to have any of those. They have to come through the full-blown subdivision process. Number 2 here, amend the subdivision, or this is a housekeeping one, amend the minor subdivision process to include neighborhood meetings and planning and zoning commission. As it sits right now, they go directly to final plat and to council. It doesn't go before the commission. We're proposing that we include a public engagement portion of this, which is something we should do and should be advantageous because neighbors should know what's going on next door.
Was that voted on, that those don't go before planning and zoning?
It was.
I thought that was dialogue.
It was,
in
well,
the
it was
meeting.
dialogue in the
I don't think
meeting
that
that
was specifically voted on.
resulted from discussions with local surveyors. And that was kind of it was talked about, it wasn't part of the ordinance, so we've done that. We're gonna bring that back forward with this change, and because we feel it's the right thing to do.
Well, and
It would have to go before planning
skipping the
and zoning?
Yes.
preliminary plat is different than skipping the preliminary plat and skipping the planning commission in the final plat process. And that's what they did, and that's not what they should have done.
Yeah.
I think everything should go before P and Z.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's the
Absolutely.
hole we're filling here with this amendment. Or that text. Number 3, it is just a housekeeping one, amend the requirements to include 2 Mylar copies of the plat map for recordation, and then along with the check for by county recording fees. We're already doing this, but we just need to get it into code. Specific to lot splits, we're gonna amend this to ensure that right-of-way dedications within lot splits, you can only count those dedications to lots with zoning 1 acre and larger. Currently, the way it reads, if you dedicate roadway as part of a split or part of a rezone, that portion, that 50-foot, 200 feet long section counts as your net acreage. So say you have a solid 2 acre piece of property, you need to dedicate 1/4 acre to the road. You could still technically split that in half and count that road that you
Didn't we
dedicated.
go over that? The lots had to be true to
So
size?
that's,
Right.
it's getting wrapped into here.
Right.
So it's something we have
Cleaning
talked
that
about.
up.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cleaning it up, it's putting it in stone. So that would be only applicable to lots with the zoning of 1 acre and larger, so that 1/4 of that half acre would not be applicable to this. Several changes to definitions. We want to amend that definition of a lot area, which is what we were just talking about for lots equal or to or greater than 1 acre in size. Roadway dedication, access easements can be included. For lots less than 1 acre, they cannot. So we have to address that in 2 places, because our code has some redundancies built into it. We're gonna amend the definition of a flag lot, that flag lots can only be used for lots with a minimum size of 1 acre. Getting a flag lot with a half-acre lot is darn near impossible, and we don't even want to try to open that door.
Good.
Create the definition of that effective lot area. This is another one of those redundancies to make sure that with the lots under 1 acre in size, if you have half-acre zoning, you are a half-acre in size regardless. Same with the quarter acre. We want to update the definitions for subdivision, tract, and lot. This was based on the discussion that we had in the previous work session following that Chino Meadows Tract B replat, so we're filling that hole as well. And then this one here, we have to talk with legal about this, but we're potentially creating a definition subset within Chapter 5, the subdivision. So all of these definitions that are found at the very front of the UDO will be found, or specific to subdivision, will be found within the subdivision chapter. So it's right there, there's no confusion, there's no,
So if there's a definition that really is written differently for other sections of the code, the ones specifically to subdivision are gonna be right in the subdivision code
Don't have to
section.
flip all over.
And
the
why
place.
does that have to go before legal?
so that was something I apologize for kind of blindsiding you on this. Everybody's always gotta run through legal. And so,
I'm not gonna ask his permission.
yeah, so it's gonna go
We're gonna
through
be
it.
telling him this is how we wanna do it, and then he has to tell us why it can't
Can't
work.
be
Yeah.
done, because it
Yeah.
seems very straightforward. If it's already in there and we're just putting it specifically where it applies,
Right.
that doesn't seem to make any sense.
Correct, and
Okay.
I don't wanna talk bad about our legal, but a lot of the stuff that we think is very boilerplate, hey, this makes sense, is not. So we just gotta
That's
make
the
sure
law.
it's the law, yeah. So to continue here, preliminary plats, we wanna amend the preliminary plat to conclude, that process to conclude at Planning and Zoning Commission. So instead of taking it all the way to council, we want it to conclude with you guys. They'll go through the public hearing process, the neighborhood meeting, they'll go through all of that, but it will conclude with your vote of either approval or denial. And this is something that I'd say darn near all of the communities in Arizona are doing. We're
Yeah.
one of the few that
Don't.
don't.
Thought it was kind of strange.
Yeah, so and the main reason is the preliminary plats are still relatively conceptual. A lot of things change through the engineering process, and adding that 30 days to get to council and then an additional 30 days to an appeal, it doesn't make sense, especially if that still is gonna change through the engineering process. So get it to you guys at the level you say, hey, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. It also offers the opportunity to, I would think, make changes faster. So if you didn't like the open space that they're providing, you can dictate to them that we would like to see this more, or this increased. They can make that and then come right back with it. So it kinda
Doesn't have to go through the council.
Correct.
Well, it gives the
For the
planning
final.
commission, gives the planning commission actually some authority.
Correct. Because to go into the council, and no offense to the council in any
Yeah.
form, but it's just,
It feels like you guys are a rubber stamp. Like
yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah.
exactly it. Okay.
So that's something we want to throw out, to add that to code. And then time limits on plats. Right now, the only one that has a time limit is the preliminary plat, and that is for a year with the option of a 1-year extension for 2 years total. What that means is you have essentially 2 years to get your prelim, or to get to your final plat. And we've ran into a lot of issues with the COVID and uptick in building this last 3 years roughly, to where we would have a preliminary plat come through and then the developer would hear back from his engineer that it is a 1.5 year wait time before they can even touch their project. So it makes a lot of our existing preliminary plats dead, and they're gonna have to come through the process as our current code sits. So we're proposing that we increase the preliminary plat timeframe to 3 years, and then add a 1-year time limit for final plats, and that's to get the final plat recorded. We have a couple outstanding final plats that, I don't have enough money for
Like,
bonds.
they're like a
or-
decade old,
Yeah.
and so they haven't recorded, And now we've changed regulations along the way.
So it's not applicable anymore.
Correct.
Grandfather,
Yeah.
that's not true.
Yeah,
And-
and so that, Frank, his code already has policy or code in place that plans are good for a year.
Yeah, construction plans expire after a year. They have to resubmit, and we have to check for any engineering details and things that might have changed
changes or anything
in that year is the primary reason we make them but they also need to submit all their review fees and all of that good stuff. So it's painful, but it's necessary to make sure, especially
Up to
with
code.
ADA standards and things, we have to make sure all that stuff's current.
So
And utility
when
codes.
somebody's got land, they come to us, they want to change it from AR5 to an SR1 and say, we want to build 6 houses here or something like that. And basically, they're not planning on doing that. They just want to get it done so that they can advertise it as being done to get a better price on the market. Is it possible for the for us to put an expiration date on that? If somebody hasn't stepped forward and started to do something within 2 years, or just 3
Tying it
years?
specifically to the zoning.
Yeah,
So I know there are ways to do that, but I know there are also challenges with that as well.
And they should at least have to show that
They're a
they're
good
doing
faith,
something rather than
correct,
just sitting on it.
on it.
yeah, because
I think
I've
that's fair.
seen 2 things now that have come to us. And as soon as we approve it, they stick a for sale sign out in front saying, well, we've done all the work for you, you can come build on it now. And they had no intentions on doing that when they came through us to begin with. It was just to get a better price to put it on the market. So if nobody comes forward and buys it and starts that, I think it should revert back to the original zoning.
So that would be, that's, trying to think where that would fall. Section 3 is within the UDO is all our zoning districts. So I don't know if it's a text amendment or if it's more council.
We can, if, there's a provision in state law that lets us put a time limit on a rezone.
Okay.
And maybe what we could do is codify it in our code so that we don't
Okay.
have to argue
Yeah.
with the attorney every time we try and put it on there.
And then maybe
We'll
offer
just argue with
that.
them once.
Is it ever tied to that owner?
It's tied to the approval.
Yeah.
Can't
So
be
maybe
tied to
we
the
could
owner.
get that included when you bring it to us as a zoning change. Maybe some sort of a heads up or a warning or a reminder that this might be a good one to put a time limit on.
I'd like to put a time limit on all of them,
And
quite
that's
frankly.
totally
Yeah.
fine with that too, long as
Yeah.
long as it's a reasonable time limit where everybody gets an opportunity for success. But there should be, like you say,
Yeah, as soon
it
as they
just
get
makes their property more attractive. Well, we don't care about that. We care about the
Yeah.
zoning part, so.
yeah, if you're working on, you bought the land, you want to do something with it, and you're moving forward, and you have the backing, the money backing you on the project. And I'd almost like to see that
Can't you
when
just
they
tie it
come.
to the owner of that? If the other lot changes ownership, so does the zoning.
That-
It's back.
I don't.
That would be
No.
tough.
I don't know that state law is worded
don't-
that way.
I don't-
I don't think it's worded
Yeah.
that way.
So that, like with conditional use permits, so if there's a specific conditional use that you're applying for, that always runs with the land. It's not based on ownership. And I think that has to go,
Same with
you would have to
zoning.
legislate.
Yeah, we have put limits on conditional use.
Right, correct.
Right, but
And
you
if-
haven't tied it to a specific owner. I don't
Yeah.
think you
I
can
don't,
legally do
I think it
that.
needs to be tied to the property.
Yeah.
Correct.
Regardless of
Yeah.
who owns it, you only got this much time to do
To
something.
do that, and I think that comes down to Arizona fundamental land use law for Arizona.
The only thing I've seen tied to the owner is the ADOT driveway permits.
That is the one.
And I don't know how they do that.
They're bigger than me.
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So based on this, is there any feedback that you would like to see tweaked or something addressed that wasn't covered?
I just have one comment.
Sure.
On the preliminary plat where it says amend the preliminary plat process to conclude at Planning and Zoning Commission, are we going to be approving the preliminary plat then?
Or
Yes.
Or
denying.
denying?
Well, if we're going to do that, then we're going to have to update our powers and duties, because right now, our powers and duties just say recommend.
Okay,
That's easy.
yeah.
So I'm just saying that, put item item 6 where we approve preliminary plats, just so it's covered in the UDO.
Perfect. Anything else?
Good question. When, say you change new ownership for land, and they do that 2-year take time limit.
Sure.
Say they sell it, a year left, is it 2 years start when that person buys it?
It's from the
continual?
ordinance getting
Okay.
voted, yep. Or in your case, if it was a planning or a preliminary plat, from your approval, your action.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that way, they have the 1 year to come back, an extra extension if they don't.
Yeah, so that three, well, so the 1 year specific to the final plat. So that this 3-year approval for a preliminary plat is essentially, you have 3 years to complete your technical.
I don't think we need an extension,
No.
that's point
No,
one.
no, yeah.
Is there any way you can put wording in there that it halfway, a year and a half or something, they need to report back on what their intentions are, or?
We could make that a condition.
Yeah, show that it is,
That's why they have to
your
check in
progress
and not
check.
just.
Do you want them
wait
to
till-
check in with you guys?
do
They
it some
can
sort
check
of
with-
I think it would be
I think they can
administrative
check.
on your
Okay.
end.
administrative
If-
check.
Then if you feel there's an issue, you can
This
bring it
needs to
before
come back to
the
P and
commission.
Z, then it needs
Okay,
to.
yeah, then we go through
So
there.
we'll need to have a condition that you
That way
guys
lets you
approve.
check,
Yeah,
check on the status, whether they
Sure.
are just sitting on it or they're actually doing something.
they're actually trying to do something,
Okay.
essentially a good faith check, yeah. Cool.
So is 1 year for the final plat, given the workload of engineers, sufficient time?
So once they're applying for final plat, they've got all of their engineering done, except for
So it's
maybe,
just basically dotting the
Correct.
i's and crossing the t's,
yes,
tuning it up a bit.
Getting their bonds and assurances
Yep.
is all it is.
Okay.
water certificate, that's, yeah, pretty much the big holdup.
Which a lot of that they should have already had done anyways.
Correct. Yep.
Industrial zoning district,
Is that what's next?
that's what it says.
Or planning authority.
How about planning authority?
I
Everybody
thought
can
that's
take
what
one.
we just did.
Nope, you just did subdivisions. Take one, pass it on.
Oh, so this, okay, so
Take
you
one, pass it
slid
on.
it in, double dip, okay.
We don't have something.
I'll erase my check mark.
I will go faster than Frank did.
Ah,
No offense, Frank.
Thank you, Frank, for coming.
Hey, that's fast for an engineer.
That was
I-
very
We're not engineers here, we're planners. So I wanted to share with you where you, as a planning commission, get your authority. The Constitution passes authority down to the states. The states in the 1920s all adopted a state enabling legislation. That is a police power. And that police power is handed down to cities, towns, and counties. And in that police power is your ability to zone, general plan, subdivide, all the things that you do are part of that police power, which has been authorized to you from the Constitution of this country. So that's the umbrella that you work under.
So that supersedes my land, my rules.
You're what?
That supersedes the my land, my rules.
Because it's a police power, you guys have the higher authority.
Wow, we get to do preliminary plats and now we got police power, kinda getting
Giving it
scary.
Well, you've
Always.
always had police power, you just didn't know that that's what it was. And when I talk to police officers about that, they're like,
Yeah, no way. We're not giving that.
not
you do
handing out
have
guns,
police
though.
power. Zoning
No
is a
guns?
police
No
power.
guns.
That's the way that you can regulate what zoning can go on somebody's property. That is a police power.
That's because of what came up in one of the last meetings where somebody declared that we could get up there and do anything we wanted,
You
which was not
cannot,
true.
but you have sidebars, and you have the authority umbrella over you.
Right, we have rules to follow just like
You
everybody else.
absolutely do, and you have case law. Every lawsuit that is a land use lawsuit results in case law, and that case law has to guide how we as planners and how you guys as planning commissioners are able to move forward with cases.
Says right here,
I
many
know you're not
states-
gonna know the case law, that's our job.
No, I've read this real quick, and if the zoning is delegated to the legislative body of the local governments, which, you know, Isn't this kind of in conflict with that House bill that I talked about 2 months ago?
Kinda,
Yeah.
That's why we, disagree with that House bill.
Yeah, well, it's now into a study group, and so far,
It needs to get tanked.
so far, no one's told me who's on that study group,
Of course not, why would they?
and it takes maybe
Stonewall.
3 requests before they finally answer one. So,
Sure, they wanna keep that
Keep
as
going.
quiet as possible.
We need you.
yeah, it's
So there's a statement in here that says in many states, the people retain the power of initiative and referendum and may use them to control land use, so
Yeah.
That is absolutely correct,
We
because
have that
it's
in
the
Arizona.
that
people.
the public has
ultimately-
the right to
Yep.
That is
challenge.
absolutely correct.
That's that appeal period, 30 days after
Yeah.
council action. So if a citizen or a group would like, council voted on something and citizens disagree, you may remember the KOA, I'm gonna bring up RV Parks again. The KOA that went forth, shoot, back in 6, 7, it was, council approved it, citizens, applied for essentially the citizens
It's a
appealed it,
referendum.
and then it went out to
Yeah.
referendum. KOA ended up pulling out before then because the economy was tanking. It never went anywhere, but Chino has a history of doing
I
this.
mean, when Walmart went in,
Yeah.
I've been in a number of those referendums in different places that I have worked. Not that people
prevent
didn't want
Walmart.
Walmart, they just,
Or
where Walmart
prisons.
decided they wanted to plot themselves wasn't appropriate.
Or people wanting to go and do a prison and the people don't want it.
Well, there's some NIMBY stuff going on, you gotta be careful about that.
That's true.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. You know, there's checks and balances in this whole system, and when people recognize them and we use them properly, our system is amazing. It really is. Okay, industrial,
Take one, pass it down if you want.
Yep.
Take one, pass it down here.
take one and pass it on.
So, this is also, kind of in regards to the last, one of the zoning items that we had last cycle, specifically was the Zito case. A lot of questions were brought up about the industrial zoning district. What you have before you is just a copy and paste of what our current zoning district for industrial is, your permitted uses, your conditional uses, and then your basic property development standards, lot size with frontage.
Has that been challenged? Not to change the subject, but has
Not
that been
yet.
challenged at all?
Not yet. So the biggest thing I wanted to go through here is that there were claims that an industrial use next to a residential property, that residential property can enact certain setback requirements just because of the nature of that property on a whole litany of other uses within, that are permitted within the industrial district. And that's not the case. So the only one that has the additional setback requirement is anything having to do with marijuana. Everything else, it is a basic 50-foot setback from all property lines.
With no buffers, no nothing.
So there would be a
A
landscape
50-foot
buffer.
buffer.
Yeah.
No, I mean buffers like different land use buffers
No.
scaling up to industrial.
Correct. The only one that has that is anything with marijuana, and that's that 500-foot separation. Everything else, salvage yard, a feedlot, anything, is a 50-foot separation.
Our goal is not to have residential next to industrial, that is a big no-no in land use planning.
Correct.
Most of those uses are not compatible for many different reasons.
Right, and industrial needs to be in a selected area
Yes.
Correct.
that can provide the buffer without, I mean, we have the 50-foot
Without needing
setback and the
setbacks.
landscaping stuff, but we don't want it next to a school
No,
or whatever.
Correct. And that underlying what dictates that is that general plan.
Right.
Right now, our general plan is, here's single family, here's commercial, and specifically in relation to the industrial properties that were owned by Mr. Wells.
That's a lot of the work we do here is to remediate that stuff.
Correct.
Which I'd like to get that settled before it ever gets to us.
That would be nice. That'd be
Yeah.
really nice. But it should be built into that general plan. It should have that residential, and then it should be a neighborhood commercial, and then it scales as it goes. It shouldn't just have the hard transitions. It needs to have those scalabilities within that general plan, and we do not have that right now. And we cannot add that in because it's what,
General plan.
yeah, it's our
Right.
general plan. That's why this new one is
So important, where
critical.
we
Yeah.
cover the bases better than ever.
Yeah,
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And we will have to work around what we have as existing.
That is very
Exactly.
true,
That is
very
it.
true.
Because right now, we do have residential right next to industrial.
Yes,
We
we
do.
do.
Yep.
And you're not gonna be able to change that
And those will be
short of.
grandfathered,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
anything new.
Yeah. And we have a lot of undeveloped area in town.
Yeah.
We do. So that was just the biggest thing here, is just to clarify that the only one that has that additional buffer is marijuana usage, period. So,
You have the updates? So the next item is how your code books are updated. Now, each of you received an updated code book that Dee Dee put together because it's easy for your code books to fall out of date. What happens when you guys, when you and then the council approves a text amendment is that your book doesn't change automatically and immediately. What you will be getting is, once the 30-day appeal period is over, we'll get a certified copy from the clerk's office, which is what you guys are getting right now. What we do then is ask you to put that in your code book behind the tab that Dee Dee created that's a non-codified text amendment. So when the clerk sends that to our codifying company, and I'm hoping that we can start doing that twice a year, then when they send us the new pages, then what you get is a sheet that says, for this page, take out this page and replace with this page. And it looks really simple, but I can tell you for a number of years, I have blown this, right? And you have to be so focused on, do not allow any distractions.
So we
Shut
can bring it
yourself.
into you and we
You
don't
can
have to
bring it
worry
into
about
me,
it.
I
We
am
will
so
do it
good
for
with
you.
this now.
This,
That was like
this,
Christmas when she gave
this
us our new
cover
book.
sheet,
Yay.
the cover sheet that lists the ordinances, they need to list, 2022-090.
Well, guess what? We don't get to tell the clerk what they're going to do.
I know, I emailed her
Okay.
a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
oh,
And I'm just saying that apparently she hasn't gotten to that yet. Because you have to, before you add these two new sections, you have to delete the one section and
Well,
reserve
and
it.
you're not adding sections right now, you're
These are
adding,
going to a separate.
right, it'll be a whole separate codification piece. So you're getting pieces that are not codified, but are adopted. So they're in effect, but they're not in place in the code where we would normally look for them.
And that's what the codifying company does for
Yes.
you. And then when they
Yes.
get that done, we bring the book to you and you fix it.
Absolutely, unless you wanna try and do this and mess your book up.
No way.
Because I guarantee you'll do it. We will be happy to make those changes for you.
And his paper's the little heavier weight paper, so it's not gonna tear out.
Yeah, and so Dee Dee prints the, anything that we get from the clerk's office, she prints it on a heavier paper, so it's more durable for us. Okay. That's it on how your code books are updated. We'll stay on top of that with you so your code books are absolutely current. The worst thing that we can do as planners is not have the correct code book. I mean, this is people's livelihoods, this is people's homes, this is people's businesses, and if we give them misinformation out of this book because our code isn't updated, we're talking lawsuits. And we are trying to avoid that at all costs. So we're gonna be super anal about how we stay on top of everything that is correct for us to know. Okay? Good. RV park. Okay, so at our
said it
last
3
meeting,
times today so far.
I'm allowed to say that. Okay. At our last meeting, we talked about what we needed to be doing with our RV parks. And you, as a commission, said that you wanted a separate zoning district for RV parks. So our goal is to put one together that has to have multifamily zoning in order to be used. So it would have to be a rezone before they could actually do the RV park. Now, what I wanted to share with you is what our current code has in it, which is super interesting. super interesting, yeah, on both sides. So our current code, the only place that we talk about RV parks is under campgrounds. And the only regulations that we actually have talk about 1,200 square feet per RV and 15 feet separation between RVs. Ding, we're done.
That's it.
That's it. Which is why, obviously, someone said, oh my gosh, we need to do something different, let's do a PAD. Well, even then, I don't feel that we have enough sidebars on that. So,
You could probably do a few
Well, I have a whole bunch
pages
of
just on
these.
RV requirements.
so what I did was researched, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. I researched other jurisdictions, take one and pass it on, and what they had listed for RVs, for RV subdivisions or RV parks, or just, the only one that had a specific RV zone was Yuma, and that's what I was used to. But you can see minimum park area can be anywhere from what we currently have, which is 7,500 square feet, to 10-acre minimum. There's different sizes for each RV space, and I didn't find any of them that had a number of units per acre. They were all how many square feet per unit. So we're gonna need to look at that. Minimum widths, interior street widths, whether they're paved, the vertical clearance, the park boundary. So you have a 10-foot or a 10-acre parcel, you have a boundary on the outside of that 10 acres. That's your buffer before you get into the park. And of course, we don't have anything that looks like that. And then when you have an internal street, what are your minimum setbacks? What's your spacing between your units? How much front yard setback do you have and a rear yard setback? How many parking spaces do we require? Are the utilities underground? How many access points do we have into the park? Is there a maximum building height? How much open space for each unit?
Nice.
So this is the kind of stuff that if you have ideas, thoughts, opinions, share with me. And in a couple of meetings, I'll bring back a text amendment for you guys to chew on.
Now, is this,
Can we take the sheets?
You absolutely can
Yellow,
take this. Yes, you can.
Yellow what we like or
Yes.
whatever, and then maybe add to it, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is just what I found that's currently in place in these jurisdictions.
so this is all just Arizona campgrounds. Did you go outside the state? Because I know,
I
I know
didn't-
back east,
I didn't,
campgrounds are more prevalent and there's probably a lot more specifications.
I was a little uncomfortable because each state has different zoning enabling legislation. And I was uncomfortable crossing over state boundary lines.
Okay,
Now, if there is some kind of an amenity that some park has someplace that you think is appropriate for us to have, we can have a list of amenities that we can require.
Flagstaff didn't have any.
I'm sorry,
Flagstaff didn't have any,
I didn't check with Flagstaff.
considering they're more in the same fire exposure area as
I
we
don't even know
are.
if there's an RV park in
Yeah, I don't,
Flagstaff.
there's a lot of
the
places that
KOA
don't
is outside
have
of
RV
Williams.
parks.
There's a Black Bart's over
Several?
there, the one outside of
Several
Black
parks?
Bart's. Yeah.
Well, and just because there might be a park in a town doesn't mean that currently they have the
Zone for it.
ability to put any new ones in.
So
There's
they
a
may
lot
not have
of,
any more regulation than anybody else does.
there's a lot of grandfathered items or things that were built in the county before they were annexed. The towns have to accept what that is. And just because something is there doesn't mean you can point to it and say, well, I want what they have. Well, guess what? We don't have the ability to give that to you. So that's just kind of how zoning works. So I'm gonna give these sheets to you guys. At our next planning meeting, you can give me back some suggestions, some ideas. I'm expecting it to be a comprehensive text amendment so that we're not guessing on anything. We won't be doing PADs. It won't be necessary because we'll have all the regulations that we need in the zoning category.
Now, this 419, this is in the town code currently.
That's ours.
Okay.
Super interesting. Yeah, I went into Will and I said, Will, show me where, other than campgrounds, we have RVs. And he said, we don't.
The other places that we're in floodplain.
Oh, yeah, there's a, if you build an RV in a floodplain, which is ridiculous. Why would you do that?
Then it becomes a boating yard.
There
It does
you go.
become a boat, a houseboat.
That's why you need the anchor.
What's that?
Noah did it.
What did it? There you go.
Noah was good at it, though.
We're
Okay,
all here
solar and
because we
wind
knew
Solar
how to
and
build a
wind
boat.
take one
Hang on,
pass.
let's see. Mr. Chairman, are you ready for the next one?
Solar wind farm.
Okay, yeah.
Take one pass. All right, so this one is a little different. Over the last, since I've been here, 4 years, we've had 3 conceptual proposals for solar farms. Very large scale, anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 plus acres in size here. None of them have gone past this initial conceptual stage. A lot of these proposals are funded through grants. They're funded through so many different things. They work with APS. They work with state land. They work with private property owners. I mean, it is a massive undertaking to have happen. So that's usually why it doesn't get past the conceptual stage at this point, and it's usually a multi-year, 4-year process to even get one of these, get the shovel in the ground with how much stuff they have to go through. All of these proposals to date have been on the far eastern edge of town, out towards Paquito Valley. If you're heading out Perkinsville, way past, still all Chino town limits, but all of them have been out there. And again, we're talking multiple parcels making up 1,000 to 3,000 plus acres. Currently, we've previous director had a different opinion on this, and it doesn't jive. He previously said that any of these uses would need to be located in an industrial district. So we're talking to have 1,000 to 3,000 acres of industrial zone land.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Our
No
code
way.
doesn't back it. So
All that did is just say we can't have them.
correct.
That's a big pot farm.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right?
Yes. So right now, where the code does allow these is in any residential district with a conditional use permit under the use public utility. Public utility includes anything from water, sewer, to power, which this falls subset to. I'm gonna skip kind of down here to this last portion here. Our definition for public utility is horrid. It says public utility, a public or private utility. It is horrid. So we're gonna fix that.
You should say interesting.
And it's not interesting, Frank, it's
No,
bad.
it's terrible.
So somebody with a generator in their backyard and a gallon of
They're a public
gasoline is a
utility.
public
I- I-
I'm
utility.
selling power to my neighbor.
If they're selling power to people.
Yeah.
See, the very
Yeah, get that
definition is
conditional
on because
use.
you can't say public utility and then say private.
Private, exactly.
Right.
So we're gonna fix that. But so that's the direction essentially any of these proposals have to take. If you've looked at the large scale zoning map for Chino Valley, pretty much everything east is all zoned SR2, which is that single family residential 2-acre minimum. We've got a couple patches of industrial land for a gravel pit, and actually I think they're both gravel pits. But everything else was annexed in under the SR2 zoning district back. It happened anywhere from a little bit before in the 90s and then to the early 2000s where a lot of that annexation came in.
So all of Wells and James's and
All
Perkins
SR2.
are all, it's not ag, it's,
It's all SR2.
If we put solar and wind farms into the open space,
That's where we're going.
We're gonna have to rewrite that because right now it just says preservation.
Yep.
Correct, and so that's part of this here is amending that open space.
Okay.
So our proposal is clear up the definition of public utility to prohibit these solar farm, the wind farms, and make them only allowable within the open space district. And the reason for that is our open space district is open space for the conservation of resources. Well, the green energy kind of falls within this. But the other half of this, and almost the more important part, is that solar and wind farms typically have a lifespan of 30 to 40 years. And once that's done, they typically clear out and then the land's vacant.
Reverts back to.
Correct. So the idea is that with the open space zoning, you're left with that after 30 years. You've got 1,000, however many acres of this open space land that would then need to come through a public process for the then highest and best use.
So
Whether-
it does it fulfills the purpose of the open land in that it's preserving it and preserving the resources, because once
Exactly.
whatever there is there, the solar farm is cleared out, the
Yep.
land is back to exactly what
Right.
it was before.
Yeah, or no, it would still be the open space zone.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
it goes back to being nothing but open land with nothing on it.
Yep, and then whoever comes in, if it is, I don't wanna say the word master plan community, or something different, a recreational facility or something,
Could still be open space
could still be,
depending
yeah.
on the general plan.
yeah, that too. So it reserves that, and then it gets rid of this 3,000 acre SR2 property, so 1,500 homes, that had to get a conditional use permit for the solar farm that's no longer there. It then is now back to 3,000 acres of SR2.
Shouldn't be under residential.
Thank you.
So this is the whole thing, getting it out of residential, getting it into a district that puts the future goals of the town into
So we're
consideration.
creating something to specifically put something into instead of going at it backwards.
Correct. So it gets ahead of it. We have one interested proposal at this point, who I think has gotten the farthest of any of them, but they would need to have this done in order for it to work. Because if, with the existing SR2 district and the conditional use permit, they're still held to the property development standards, which means you can only cover 50% of your lot in SR2. That doesn't work for them. So we would increase the lot coverage.
Not for solar.
Yeah, no. So they'd get some benefit from this, but the long-term goal of the town, to where we're setting this aside towards general plan, what it looks like in 30 years, 40 years, whatever. So we're not stuck with, here's a large area of 1,500 homes that are entitled at that point in time.
So in that rewriting of that, maybe there needs to be a provision that when the solar farm or the wind farm technology is obsolete or unusable, that it has to be completely removed
Yes.
as part of being in the process of even building it.
Perfect.
Including foundations.
Everything back
Yeah,
to
compostable.
natural
Natural.
soil and maybe even replanting native grasses or something.
The remediation portion
Yeah,
of that.
like you would do with a mine.
Yeah.
Got to go back to the natural
Yeah.
stuff.
All right. Any other? Oh, yeah.
Does the solar farm on 4 South that's owned by APS, does that fall under any of this?
So right now, they have a conditional use permit to operate as it is. They would not be affected by this. If they wanted to do a new one or an expansion, they would.
Because they're gonna be expanding tremendously, right?
At that site, I haven't seen anything. They're talking battery expansion, but not panel expansion. So anything outside of that realm of that CUP, which encompasses the whole parcel, they would need to adhere to this if it gets passed.
Because I think they were talking like 100,000 batteries. I mean, it's
Correct,
huge.
yeah, correct. They have quite a bit out there that they're talking about. So. Anything else? Do you want to do a question?
It's up to the chairman.
Do you have a
What are we
question?
doing?
We have a question from the public, if that's something you would like to entertain, sir.
Okay, so in these work study sessions, do we have a provision to entertain questions from the public? Not that I don't want to, but just want to make sure we're following the rules. Is public comment allowed, or is this,
I think this is just a work study session. If we open it to public, we'd never get through everything.
So maybe we could offer an alternative that at the next planning and zoning meeting,
Okay.
when it comes to the public speaking for items that are not on the agenda, maybe those questions could be brought forth, because between then and now, I doubt there's a huge amount of this gonna get resolved or done anything with.
No, the public should be able to comment on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, once that language, absolutely. But right now, it's getting that feedback to even just shape what that.
So let's maybe ask the public, Rachel, to come back and talk to us.
Suggestion, it wasn't even a question.
Just, but bring it back to the meeting, and
Okay.
that way it's on the record, and
Right.
it's more of an official
Sure.
way.
Yep.
I think that's the best way to do that.
So before we hit the very last item, Dee Dee has asked if there's a way that we could possibly manage the speakers in our meetings a little tighter. We struggle with spelling of people's names. We struggle with who actually came up, and if we have a record, like they write down their name and give the speaker card to Dee Dee.
So maybe that's the rule that we propose, is that
Don't
if
you
you're
have that
going to
now?
speak, you must fill out a speaker card.
Right.
Or set some of them there, so if they walk
Well,
up
and they're
last
at
minute.
they're on the table, and then Dee Dee has all the cards, then you can call
Maybe
on-
and that would help me, because I can say, okay, who's the next person up
Right.
according to the
and
speaker
she'll
card.
have all the cards.
Right. And then, because I always want to give everybody an opportunity to speak, if they don't fill out a speaker card, they may just come up to the microphone and state their for or against whatever it is
Well,
without
and they still need to
explanation.
fill out a card for us,
Okay,
because we struggle with minutes.
right, and with the names, because I do the same
Yeah.
thing. It's hard for sometimes to spell the name properly.
Okay, awesome. Would you
So we
fire
can
up?
set
Yes.
that as a rule,
Yes,
Yeah.
and we can do that in the next meeting?
yes.
Okay, that's fine with me. Anybody else that here have any opposition to that?
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share tonight is our notification boundaries. So currently, there's 6 things that we do in state law. There's 6 things that we do for notification. State law requires 1. Okay, so there's our list that's being handed out. Now, I also am a planner, and I hear things repeatedly, and my brain starts chewing on stuff.
Need one more.
You need another one?
We got a spare here.
Oh, it's coming across
needs
the
one?
aisle.
Thank you.
So I know that the state laws were written in Phoenix. I also know Phoenix is super urban. And I also know that 300 feet in Phoenix, where you have 5 and 6 and 7,000 square foot lots everywhere, that's a good distance. And the 300-foot notice is supposed to be for those properties directly impacted. This is not your shout to the world that something's going on. That's why we do the notice in the newspaper. That's why we put the stuff on our website. That's why we post at the library and the post office and do all those other things. That's for everybody. And we post the site. So if you happen to drive by the site, you'll see what's going on. The 300-foot radius, or the notification of neighboring property owners, is for people that are directly impacted.
But out here, 300 feet might get one person.
Thank you. So that's why we're gonna move ahead. Is it just a click?
I think.
Where am I?
Or the wheel.
Wheel.
Okay, so what I did is I took a 6,500 square foot lot subdivision. I picked a parcel, it's probably hard to tell, but it should be, whoop,
It's yellow.
where's my cursor?
Yellow.
So there's a yellow square that should be in the center, thank you. I'm gonna let you do that.
Absolutely.
And drew a 300-foot radius, and we got 62 parcels. And you can see some of those parcels really are not directly impacted by that activity. So then I drew a 600-foot radius, and we got 162 feet, and now we have a whole bunch more people that really are not directly impacted. And then I did a 900-foot radius, and we have 296 parcels at 40 cents a postcard. You do the math. I don't have the budget.
Going to 44 cents on July 1st.
Okay, and now it's gonna go up to 44 cents. Thank you so much for that. So then I went to the next size, which is the 70, what do I have, 7,400? So at 300 feet, we get 43 people. And if you look at where those parcels are, you can see that we really are tagging the people directly impacted in an area that's that dense. And you can also see the numbers, how they increase as we get to a bigger radius. I just wanted to use the same radius options for every single parcel size so you could see the difference in the numbers. So let's go to the next one. So then I went to an acre, and I tried to pick parcels that had nothing on them so nobody would go, oh my gosh, you picked my parcel. There's nothing on this. So at 300 feet for a 1 acre parcel, we hit 13 parcels for 300 feet. I don't think that that's big enough. So if we go to the 600, you can see that that looks more like what we were seeing in the more dense parcels at the 300-foot radius. And if you look at the numbers between, oh, I should pass these out. Go ahead.
Might need to be like.
So you're gonna get one of each of these. These are all separate. I didn't collate them.
We'll make a couple rounds.
Sorry, my collator was,
Might need to be like a sliding scale. So 1 acre lot, certain radius, 5 acre lot, certain radius, 10 acre lot.
well, I didn't go up to 10, so yeah, that one, thanks. Wait a minute, which is that? Yeah, and then we'll do the 2 acre.
No problem.
So I know it's a lot of stuff for you guys to look at, but I wanted you to have stuff to take home so you could do a comparison and look at these numbers. So then I went to the next area, which is a 2 acre parcel. And if I do a 300-foot radius, I'm not really touching enough of the parcels that's really being impacted by whatever this person's proposing to do. But if you go to the 600, you can see that we are touching, I believe, an adequate number of people. When you go and you hit the 900, now we're grabbing parcels that really are not directly impacted. So the idea was to expand that radius and make sure there's a minimum number of parcels that we always send a notice to. So we expand that boundary, but not for the 6,000 square foot lots or the 7,000 square, anything under an acre seems to be adequate for the 300-foot radius.
It probably is adequate, but should we be looking at the 2 new zoning that we have for single-family residents, which is half acre, quarter acre?
We do, but we don't have any subdivisions like that I could tag into.
Oh,
But
okay.
the 300
I
foot radius,
realize
if you look
that,
at the
but
1 acre,
Mhm.
the 600 foot radius for a half acre or quarter acre is gonna be more than enough.
yeah, that's all I'm saying is that if we're gonna be doing it for this, we might as well do it for those 2 also.
So maybe we do the cutoff the cutoff line is 1 acre larger and less than an acre.
Yeah.
And it looks to me like the 600-foot radius meets the requirement on both parts of the larger properties, but then on the smaller properties, the 300-foot rule is more than adequate.
Right.
And maybe that's something that
And if you
we
have,
work a text amendment towards that solution.
if you're in a larger, say it's surrounded by all AR5 or whatever, maybe you
We
could have
go
a
bigger.
minimum, well, maybe you could just have a minimum lot number.
Well, and that's what I
Maybe-
said,
Maybe
that
20 lots.
we
and
have a
that's gonna-
minimum number of
that-
parcels that we tag.
Then you're not tied to a radius, you're just gonna
Okay.
include.
In the larger one or in all of them?
No, the
and
larger.
If you're like a 5 acre or above,
Okay, that's,
then you
yeah,
can just
because
have a
that's sort
minimum
of a
lot.
special circumstance there, because you could have a 3,000 acre parcel there that
Nobody gets notified.
nobody gets notified. The guy's gonna put
Well,
a
and
slaughterhouse in the middle.
That's why I say a minimum number of lots notified.
Right, and that actually works well with the larger.
Yeah.
So maybe you guys could come back with some of those thoughts
Yeah.
in a form, and we
Absolutely.
could tweak it again.
Okay, so
Is
just
this
wanted
only
to
for
share that.
residential? Is this only for residential?
No, this
for
is for
everything.
all of your zoning actions, all of your general plans. Well, actually, general plan is a bigger distance. Every action that you guys have seen so far would use these same notification requirements.
The RV park that was discussed,
Mhm.
that was a 30 acre parcel. And many people complained that they were never notified.
Well, because many people think that they live a mile away and they should get a personal postcard, and that's not going to happen.
So even on the 30 acre lot, this, it would adhere.
So that's where that.
That minimum number of lots would apply
Right.
at that
Yeah.
point, so there's still gonna be quite a few. Say if you had 20
And
lots
remember-
minimum, that could go to quite a large area.
And not only that, but there's the other avenues that were listed that we've
Correct.
already exceeded the state requirement by many times.
5 other ways we are notifying people.
So if somebody's really interested, you just look at the website.
The idea is that if you are directly impacted, you get a postcard.
And that postcard invites you to that neighborhood meeting to where it should hopefully be a constructive meeting to iron out what the issue is and feedback back and forth, trying to get that done with the people who have the biggest impact.
Yep.
on that.
I would like to see it in the Chino paper instead of the Prescott paper.
So
Maybe
Struggle?
we
We have
have
a
to do,
struggle with
bo-
that.
we have to do both because the Chino paper doesn't meet the requirements because it's only published once a week, or once every 2
Yeah.
weeks, whatever it is.
we could look at this again, but the reason why we'd always been doing the Prescott is that there are more readers of that paper than, unfortunately, the Chino Valley Review that sits in a lot of people's driveways and just sits there.
Which
So,
that wouldn't matter to me as much, but the fact that it doesn't fall in line with our notification timeframes that we
is
need,
it a big deal to do both? Other than expense?
I think we
I was
need
gonna
to
say.
look at how much that would cost us.
So maybe we approach the Chino
Maybe
Well, so they're
approach it-
thankfully-
Maybe approach the Chino Review, maybe they'd be willing to even do it.
as a public
As a
Well,
service.
public service.
Chino Review is controlled by the Prescott News Network.
No, I know
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
but you still gotta talk, you gotta start going up the
Most
chain
of
of command.
Most of the ads that are listed in our paper come direct copy print from the Prescott paper, so it shouldn't be that difficult for them to not
It's
have
just-
to
It's
retypeset
just
it,
money.
just
Yeah.
slide it over.
By the way, they just raised their alert rates.
Yeah, they did.
So, but it won't hurt to
We'll look
ask.
at it, we'll tell you what works and what doesn't work.
Okay.
I mean, this is not unique to this community. There's many places that I have worked that they had to go to a different newspaper. That still had circulation within the community, but it wasn't that community's newspaper, which came out once a week.
I have high hopes for this new general plan process to get the public more involved with these
Absolutely.
processes. That's gonna be a huge thing, it's gonna be a benefit of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna get more people involved. Hopefully.
We're
That's the
going
goal.
optimistic.
That's the goal.
Well,
That's
it
our
works
charge.
better if everybody participates.
Yep.
Right. Doesn't mean everybody gets what they want, but you know what, if everybody's working together, everybody can get some piece that works for them.
Yep.
So, okay, Mr. Chairman,
Well, I covered all the check marks. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion
You
to
never
adjourn.
called the meeting to order.
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
you did.
All right, I'm making a motion.
We're gonna go through all
You
of
can't
I
fool me.
second.
Nice try.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would like to thank the public for sitting here and participating with us, even if you couldn't talk, just your being here is helpful. Uses up all the spare copies we got.
Well, that saves them going into